The first 250 people to click the link in the description below will receive a free 2-month trial to Skillshare, where you can easily learn to start your own YouTube channel or business.
Dear child, I see your eyes. You already know the truth. Whomever you're waiting for on Jakku, they're never coming back.
The character of Rey was one of the great mysteries that came out of The Force Awakens, and many questions followed her introduction. Who is she? Where did she come from? Who are her parents? And why is she so powerful? While some of these questions may be answered in Episode 8, the question of Rey's parentage is expected to remain a mystery a little while longer. Many surnames have been attributed to Rey over the past 2 years. Skywalker, Solo, Kenobi, Erso, recently Miko, and even Palpatine has been suggested. All of these theories have been researched, crafted, and presented to the fandom in a convincing manner, and depending on who you talk to, specific fans all have their own beliefs. I initially came down on the side of Rey being a Skywalker, because she gave him the lightsaber at the end of The Force Awakens, and then R2-D2 woke up when she entered the base. That was enough for me. Case closed. 2 years after Episode 7, I come down on the side of Rey being a descendant of the Dark Lord of the Sith himself, Emperor Palpatine, or as I like to call him, Palps!
The Senate will decide your fate.
I am the Senate.
Not yet.
It's treason, then.
Now, this is a theory that has been explored extensively before, but since it's my favorite Rey theory, I wanted to return to it in preparation for The Last Jedi. And then I can say, oh, look, I called it. The Rey Palpatine theory for me is not so much a theory as it is wishful thinking. The theory itself does have some compelling evidence, but from a storytelling perspective, I'd like to see how this revelation would affect the character of Rey on a personal level. It would be very interesting to explore the dynamic of fighting for the light, yet being a descendant of the dark. Since Rey was a young girl, she has been isolated from the world, living as a lone scavenger on the desert planet of Jakku. For all we know, she is an orphan, abandoned by parents who may very well be long dead. If Rey were to discover that she is the descendant of one of the most powerful and maniacal Sith Lords in history, you can only imagine how this would affect her emotionally and mentally, how it would change her ambition and destiny. Would she feel pressured to change her allegiance because of her ancestry? As the last surviving heir to the Empire, will she feel obligated to live up to Palpatine's legacy? Luke Skywalker is faced with a similar test in the original trilogy. After discovering that Darth Vader is his father, Luke is tempted to join the dark side in Return of the Jedi. But he resists, and he successfully brings his father back to the light. The biggest difference between Luke and Rey is really their childhood. Luke was raised by loving parental figures, his aunt and uncle. He had a life, he had friends, he had family, all things Rey does not have. Luke had some semblance of a future to look forward to. He also had a reason to fight for the good guys. Being that Rey has lived in complete isolation without any friends or family to speak of, she may leap at the chance to avenge her deceased family, no matter how evil or cruel her family legacy is. Like joining the Resistance, it would present Rey another chance to be a part of something bigger than herself. Rey did form friendships with Han, BB-8, and Finn in The Force Awakens, but these relationships are only days old. Rey doesn't have that same incentive to fight for the light side. Also, it's very apparent in The Force Awakens that Rey was obsessed with the thought of reuniting with her family. She constantly tells people that she wants to return to Jakku because her family is going to one day return for her. If Rey was to learn that she is a descendant of Palpatine, this obsession with reuniting with her family may give her enough cause to abandon the Resistance in favor of the First Order.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
With less than 5 hours remaining in the sequel trilogy, it may be difficult to address all the implications of Rey being related to Palpatine, but how awesome would it be if she was Palpatine's heir? That's why I said it was more of wishful thinking for me. I want it to be true more than I believe it actually is true, but there is some evidence that supports the theory. The first evidence we have to link Rey and Palpatine is fighting style. The similarities in their fighting styles were quickly noticed by fans during Rey's duel with Kylo Ren. Her duel with Ren was one of the earlier examples of how powerful she is and could potentially become. If Rey was the descendant of Palpatine, it would explain why she was so goddamn powerful in the first place. In his prime, Palpatine was known to match the fighting style of any opponent he faced in combat, no matter the difficulty of the fighting form. Notice how in his duels with Mace Windu and Yoda, he is able to adapt to their respective forms with little to no effort. Mace Windu was a master of the 7th fighting form, which focuses on channeling both the light and dark sides of the Force. Palpatine was able to fend off Windu long enough for Anakin to arrive and finish the job. Yoda was a master of the 4th fighting form, which employs acrobatic jumps, twirls, and twists to drive power into bold attacks. As challenging as this fighting form is, Palpatine was able to expertly adapt to this intense fighting style, and he even manages to disarm Yoda. Yoda is forced to retreat and goes into exile on Dagobah. As a Yoda fanboy, it's hard for me to admit that he lost this fight, but give Palpatine credit. He took advantage of his surroundings, and his extensive knowledge of the Force helped him defeat one of the most powerful Jedi in history. In The Force Awakens, Rey has shown the ability, like Palpatine, to match the fighting style of an experienced, albeit injured, Kylo Ren. Not only does she match Kylo Ren, but she starts to overpower him as the duel goes on, and by the end of the duel, Kylo Ren is laying on the ground, defeated. There is one move in particular that Rey consistently uses against Kylo Ren in this duel. With both hands on the lightsaber's hilt, she jabs at Ren with a horizontal stab motion, thrusting her shoulder forward and throwing all of her weight behind the attack. This is the exact same move that Palpatine uses several times against Mace Windu in Revenge of the Sith. Rey is shown using this shoulder thrust move 2 more times against Kylo Ren. Since this move is not found in any traditional fighting form, it's an indication of the fighter's ability to improvise by creating their own fighting style in the middle of a duel. Rey and Palpatine are the only 2 characters in Star Wars who are shown to use this horizontal stabby stab type move, and they are both also shown to have the ability to improvise fighting form. Rey being the master improviser, since she wasn't even trained in any single fighting form that we know of. Our second piece of evidence involves Rey's name. A lot of the names in Star Wars usually have a double meaning. The most famous example is Darth Vader. The name Vader is derived from the German word for father. Obviously, Darth Vader is the Dark Father. In fact, most Sith Lords have names that contain double meanings. Darth Sidious derives from the word insidious. Darth Tyrannus derives from the word tyrannical. Darth Ndidu is an anagram for undead. And Darth Maul literally translates to hammer. Our heroes on the light side of the Force also have names of double meaning. Luke is a biblical name that derives from the Latin word for light. Yoda derives from the Hebrew word for wisdom. And Han Solo, he's a loner. That Han, he's always, solo. Please don't include that in the Han Solo movie. I've always believed that Rey's name was simply meant to be a letter shy of gray, a clever way to symbolize the resolution of gray through refined Jedi sight. The answer to the prophecy found in the Journal of the Whills, Rey will become the Grey Jedi. The name Rey actually translates to king in Spanish, derived from the Latin rex. History tells us that kings are neither good nor evil, but they are royalty. If Rey is revealed to be the descendant of Palpatine, then her name would make perfect sense. Some may even consider her to be the true heir to the Empire, and then John Williams would have to craft her a new theme. A more subtle piece of evidence that links the 2 characters is music. Star Wars is famous for its iconic score crafted by legendary composer John Williams. Star Wars is the type of movie where you can watch any scene on mute and you can still hear the music that accompanies it. One of the techniques that John Williams employs in his original Star Wars score was the use of leitmotifs. Leitmotifs are defined as short, constantly reoccurring musical phrases that are usually associated with a particular person, place, or idea. The use of leitmotifs was made famous through the operas of the 19th century composer Richard Wagner. John Williams employed this technique by crafting individual themes for specific characters within the Star Wars universe. For example, the ominous and intimidating Imperial March that signals the presence of Darth Vader. The sweet melodic phrase that accompanies Princess Leia throughout the original trilogy. Or my personal favorite, the Force theme that is heard while Luke Skywalker watches the binary sunset on his home planet of Tatooine. Rey's theme was probably the best piece of new music that came out of The Force Awakens. I already feel nostalgic when I hear it. I'm instantly taken back to the scene where Rey is being dwarfed by a massive Star Destroyer, banging on her canteen for one last drop of water before she begins her descent down one of the great dunes of Jakku. The flutes begin to play and John Williams proves that he's still got it. But Rey's signature theme may have darker implications. John Williams has confirmed that Rey's theme was inspired by the Force theme, but her theme also shares similarities with the Emperor's theme. Let's listen to Palpatine's theme first. So on piano, Palpatine's theme goes like this. Now let's listen to the ostinato from Rey's theme. Now, if you play the ostinato without ornament, removing the extra notes, you are left with a distilled version of Rey's theme that goes like this. Now let's go back to Palpatine's theme. And now Rey. They are pretty similar. Also notice how both themes begin with brass bass dissonances, with the Emperor's theme transforming into something more sinister and dark, and Rey's theme gradually becoming more calm and spirited. Of course, these two themes were composed almost 30 years apart, and in keeping with the traditional sound of Star Wars, John Williams could have coincidentally made them sound similar. Would John Williams actually know the truth of Rey's parentage? It's possible, but a part of me just doesn't think the people behind The Force Awakens are that clever. Don't get me wrong, I love the movie, but that would be David Lynch, George R.R. Martin, Kendrick Lamar level of subtlety. John Williams has been known to subtly include the Emperor's theme in places where you wouldn't expect it to be heard. A variation of Palpatine's theme can be heard during the celebration on Naboo. The theme is significantly sped up, creating a more exciting and celebratory atmosphere, symbolizing Palpatine's secret victory from the shadows, the Phantom Menace. If John Williams did intentionally craft Rey's theme as a variation of the Emperor's theme, this would be expert-level subtlety. Intentional or not, it is food for thought. Our fourth piece of evidence linking Rey to Palpatine is the defining characteristic of many Sith Lords who have appeared in Star Wars: anger in the form of rage. The entire prequel trilogy is dedicated to the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker, and throughout the trilogy he is shown to have extreme fits of uncontrollable rage. Anger and the fear of death is what ultimately led to Anakin's fall to the dark side, and his rage made him that more powerful. In The Force Awakens, we see that same uncontrollable rage from Kylo Ren. He struggles with controlling his emotions and eventually surrenders to the pull of the dark side. Palpatine is a bit different from his Sith counterparts. While he does show moments of intense rage and anger, he also possessed the uncanny ability to control his emotions, which basically supports the idea that Palpatine was a full-fledged psychopath. By crafting a non-threatening, good-natured persona, Palpatine was able to rise through the ranks of the Old Republic, all the way to Supreme Chancellor and ultimately Emperor. When he finally gains control of the galaxy, he no longer has to hide his rage, and he unleashes his unlimited anger, fear, uncontrollable rage. These usually aren't qualities that are found in many Jedi. Throughout The Force Awakens, Rey is shown to consistently lose her temper. She struggles to hold back her rage during her duel with Kylo Ren, and even contemplates killing him. In The Force Awakens novelization, a voice calls out to her, presumably Snoke, and tells her to kill Ren. For a brief moment, she considers the voice, but the opportunity is missed. If Starkiller Base was never destroyed, maybe Rey succumbs to her rage and goes in for the kill. I mean, look at her. She's fucking pissed. Look at that face. That's a Palpatine face. Palps! Luke Skywalker was faced with the same test in Return of the Jedi. He has defeated Darth Vader, and the Emperor tells him to kill his father and take his place by the Emperor's side. Luke decides to spare his father's life and refuse the Emperor's offer. He wasn't separated by a crack in a giant planet. This decision was his alone. Rey, on the other hand, definitely would have went in for the kill if Starkiller Base wasn't destroyed. The opening voiceover for the second Last Jedi trailer features the voice of Snoke, and he says, "When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power." While he very much could be talking to Kylo Ren, many fans believe that he is actually addressing Rey. Once again, raw, untamed power, the inability to control your emotions.
I've seen this raw strength only once before. It didn't scare me enough then. It does now.
Compared to Palpatine, it makes sense as to why Rey cannot control her emotions. Palpatine was born into a rich family, and he was raised on the wealthy planet of Naboo. He spent his life in politics, crafting relationships and learning how to manipulate those around him. Palpatine had it easy. All he had to do was learn. In the case of Rey, she grew up alone, on a desolate planet with no one but herself to depend on. Naturally, she had to develop extreme survival skills if she wanted to survive. Anger, fear, and rage come naturally to Rey. They were all necessary traits for her survival. What leaves this theory unfinished is the actual biological link between Rey and Palpatine. Since the time span between episodes 6 and 7 is about 30 years, it's impossible for Rey to be Palpatine's daughter. She would have to be his granddaughter or great-granddaughter. Throughout the original and prequel trilogy, Palpatine is never seen with a wife or mistress, but it's not crazy to think that the Emperor of the Galaxy had a secret love affair. When you're the king of the world, it really doesn't matter what you look like. The other possibility of relation between Rey and Palpatine is one of biological replication, the idea that Rey is actually a clone of Palpatine. This is probably the most far-fetched and out-of-left-field piece of evidence we have for this theory, if you can even call it evidence, but the idea of a Palpatine clone is not foreign to the Star Wars mythology. The Star Wars comic Dark Empire is no longer considered to be Star Wars canon. Nonetheless, it is still our best point of reference for a Palpatine clone. The story of Dark Empire takes place about 6 years after the Battle of Endor, with the rebellion still fighting for control of the galaxy. Luke discovers that the Emperor survived his apparent death at the hands of Darth Vader by transferring his mind and consciousness into several different clones of himself, essentially becoming immortal. Luke was so impressed by the Emperor's power that he agreed to become his apprentice. The actual Star Wars movies are obviously no strangers to the idea of cloning. Before the events of The Phantom Menace, Jedi Sifo Dyas ordered the production of a clone army to fight for the Republic. Sifo Dyas was murdered by Palpatine and Count Dooku, who then went on to fund the army themselves in their attempt to cause galactic civil war. So Palpatine was definitely familiar with the Kaminoans' process of cloning, since he worked closely with them in producing the clone army. Could it be possible that Palpatine had the Kaminoans make him a personal clone? Since Rey was born 11 years after Palpatine's death, it's just impossible for her to be Palpatine's daughter. But if she is a clone, then her age becomes irrelevant. Using his own DNA, Palpatine could have commissioned a genetic clone of himself, similar to what Jango Fett did with Boba Fett. Young Boba Fett was born into adolescence and will grow up to become his own man, yet he is Jango's clone all the same. Basically, he is Jango's son in the form of a genetic clone. Since Rey is female, she wouldn't be considered an exact replicant of Palpatine, more like his daughter. Rey will obviously share similar features and characteristics with Palpatine, but she will grow up to become her own person. In the aforementioned comic Dark Empire, Palpatine basically had these clones created as an ultimate contingency plan. If he were to die prematurely, then one of his clones would take his place. Since the Dark Empire comic is no longer canon, maybe the writers decided to keep Palpatine's contingency plan in the form of a new character, that character being Rey. There's something strange going on with Rey's memory. She knows that she was left on Jakku, but she can't remember who left her there. She only refers to them as my family. Her family is a mystery, not only to us, but to Rey herself, and this amnesia may have been supplanted in her brain by something or someone. When different characters insist that she should leave Jakku and start her own life, she becomes agitated and quickly shuts them down.
You can fly anywhere. Why go back? You got a family? Got a boyfriend? Cute boyfriend?
None of your business, that's why.
I know all about waiting. For my family. They'll be back. One day.
In the second Last Jedi trailer, Snoke's voice is heard saying, "When I found you, I saw raw, untamed power." While Snoke is Kylo Ren's master, some fans saw this being directed towards Rey, and that Snoke was the one who initially discovered Rey. Maybe Snoke was the one who discovered Palpatine's contingency plan, while also discovering the location of this genetic clone. There's still the question of Jakku. Why would Snoke leave this powerful child to live by herself on a junkyard planet in the middle of nowhere? What's so damn special about Jakku? Well, there is one idea. There's a popular Star Wars fan theory that says Supreme Leader Snoke is actually Gallius Rex, an Imperial officer from Jakku who gained control of the Empire after Palpatine was killed. Gallius Rex was introduced in the first Aftermath novel, written by Chuck Wendick. I won't dive too far into the theory, but it is a theory that I'd highly recommend checking out. It's pretty convincing. One of the main points of the theory is the relationship between Gallius Rax and the Emperor. The final chapter of the Star Wars novel Life Dead features a flashback to when a young Gallius Rax meets the Emperor for the first time on Jakku. The Emperor senses a great destiny for the boy, and he tasks Rax with staying on the planet to stand guard over something precious. This precious something is actually an Imperial excavation into the core of Jakku. Palpatine says that it was significant 1,000 years ago, and it will be significant again. There have been many theories as to what this precious something is. What was Palpatine searching for in the core of Jakku? There's one theory that states Palpatine discovered an ancient Sith temple buried in Jakku and left Gallius Rax in charge of defending it. This could be our answer as to why Snoke would leave Rey on Jakku by herself. So let's assume that Snoke is Gallius Rax. After discovering Palpatine's clone, Snoke sends Rey to live alone on Jakku, surrounded by the dark energy of this ancient Sith temple that he has been protecting since he was a boy. He then supplants false memories into Rey's mind, memories of her family leaving her on Jakku and that one day they will return. What better way to make sure that Rey never leaves? By leaving Rey on Jakku, she would grow into adulthood being surrounded by dark energy. She would develop incredible survival skills, learning to fight for her life and fend for herself with no guidance or supervision. She would become animalistic. It's the perfect atmosphere to mold a child into a Sith Lord. Fear, anger, rage, all common traits to the dark side of the Force. And what better way to make sure that she never leaves by telling her that she can't, because her family is going to one day return. It's almost as if Snoke was recreating the childhood of Luke Skywalker, but for the opposite effect. In the novelization of Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan tells Yoda that he wants to train Luke and Leia the way that Anakin should have been trained. Yoda disagrees and says that they should allow the twins to live their lives free of the Jedi dogma, to live and grow and develop, be guided by the living Force instead of actual training. Snoke may have had the same idea with Rey. Instead of taking her under his wing and training her to become his apprentice, Rey was guided by the living Force on Jakku. And like how the living Force guided Luke to reunite with Obi-Wan and Yoda, the living Force may be guiding Rey back into the hands of the Supreme Leader himself.
Fulfill
What makes the idea of Rey being a Palpatine clone seem plausible is all the similarities between the two characters. The fighting style, the choice of name, the musical motifs, even the British accents. And of course, their raw, unequivocal power in the Force. But there is such a huge gap in canon between episodes 6 and 7 that it's difficult to find a smoking gun for Rey's parentage. Any theory you read is really just conjecture. If I was a betting man, I would not put money on Rey being Palpatine's clone, or descendant, but I would love to lose that bet, because it's something that I'd really enjoy seeing. Now, before I go, I want to give a quick shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and thanks to Skillshare, the first 250 people who click the link in the description below will receive a free 2-month trial. A lot of people ask us what softwares do we use to create these videos, and we tell them that we use a combination of Harmony and Final Cut Pro. Harmony is a great animation software that gives us the freedom to create and craft any crazy idea that comes to our heads. But of course, an animation software like this comes with a learning curve, and that's what's so great about Skillshare. They have thousands of courses and tutorials that are designed to help you learn a new skill. You can learn to start your own YouTube channel with an easy-to-follow course like After Effects for Beginners and the Essentials of Final Cut Pro. Again, the first 250 people who sign up with the link below will receive 2 months of learning for free. And after that, it's just $10 a month. So what are you waiting for, man? Go click that link before these 250 spots fill up. Hurry!